Hello, everyone, and welcome to this microlearning titled, What Do Sexual Assault Cases Look Like in Our Community? Findings and Recommendations. This is the fourth and final microlearning in our Case File Review series. So first, we will discuss the purpose of the final chapter of the Case File Review Workbook. Next, we will provide an overview of the activities teams will complete in the Findings and Recommendations chapter before finally determining the next steps teams can take when they complete the review process. As a reminder, this microlearning series is part of our World Project, which is supported by the Office of Violence Against Women. We would like to thank OVW for their support. My name is Fatima Hayoma, and I am one of the Rural Project Coordinators at SVJI at Mincasa. I've been with Mincasa for 3 years now. Previously, I was a multilingual advocate and prevention education coordinator.
My name is Miranda Gonzalez, and I am the other Rural Project Coordinator at SVJI at Mincasa. I have been with Mincasa for going on 2 years now. Previously, I was a community-based advocate at a dual service organization. First, we would like to revisit the definition of case file review. It is a systematic process of examining case files and identifying themes within the criminal legal response. It can be used to determine compliance with or deviance from established policies and protocols. Case file review also can include a determination of gaps and barriers to effective community response to sexual assault. Throughout this microlearning, we will be using the term case file. This refers to all legal documents and other records accumulated in the criminal legal response to a sexual assault. This can include reports created by law enforcement, forensic medical examinations, and prosecutorial notes as they relate to contact with the victim survivor. We at SVJI recommend using closed cases when using this form of evaluation. Today, we will be focused on the third and fourth stages of our general evaluation model. In the third stage, reflect, teams will review their preliminary themes and formalize what they have learned. In the fourth stage, apply, teams will recommend actions to improve the system's response to sexual violence. These activities are closely related and are found in the same chapter of the workbook. This is the final chapter of Case File Review and the last microlearning of the series. If you have not seen the previous 3 microlearnings in the series, we recommend watching those first before continuing. Our Findings and Recommendations chapter is where the information learned is applied to the team's community. After taking a break from reading cases, teams will revisit their notes with a fresh perspective. They will then formalize the observations and themes discovered in the review into findings. Teams will then transition into action. They will create concrete recommendations on what to do in response to the information learned and develop a plan to accomplish those recommendations.
There are 3 activities in this chapter of the workbook. Each of these activities may be completed in a 90-minute meeting, and some may take less time depending on your team's needs. These activities include finalizing findings, creating recommendations, and forming an action plan for the future. We would like to remind teams that these activities are a helpful starting point, but they can be adapted to fit the needs of the team. If you are following along with the digital workbook, the page number for each activity is listed in the bottom left corner of the slide. When teams gather after the actual review, they should review their notes and observations from the preliminary themes handout. Team members will then organize their observations into broader focus areas. For example, during the actual review, several team members may have noticed that advocacy services are not always documented in the police report. Based on those observations, the team notes a theme that victim advocates are not always involved in the victim survivors report. The team determines that the focus area is developing a victim survivor-centered response. Some questions team members may consider when developing these focus areas include: how do these observations relate back to our anchor question? How do these themes relate to each other? Where can we become more victim survivor-centered in our response? What barriers have existed in the response for marginalized victim survivors? And do these observations reflect our current protocols? The team will then document these 3 broad patterns as their future focus areas. Below each focus area, members will document the preliminary themes and general observations so that future team members understand the history of this project. These focus areas will create the foundation for recommendations moving forward. After completing this activity, team members are encouraged to share the focus areas with their discipline's leadership. Looking to the future, team members will brainstorm actionable ideas based on the focus areas they developed earlier. Teams may divide into smaller groups, one for each focus area, and brainstorm potential recommendations. To get started, members can ask questions like: how well are we doing in this focus area? How are underserved communities centered in these themes? And what are our strengths and areas for improvement? Once each group has completed brainstorming, they can share their ideas with the whole team. The team can then determine whether the goals are long or short term. For example, a long-term goal may be to update the team's protocol to include what service information is shared with victim survivors when they report to law enforcement. After sharing these goals, the team may select 3 to 5 recommendations to begin working towards. Teams may use various methods to select these recommendations, such as a consensus model, majority voting, or dot voting. Once teams have determined which recommendations they will begin working towards, it's time to create an action plan. During this phase, teams will discuss the concrete steps needed to complete each recommendation. As teams are planning, some questions they will need to answer are: what steps are necessary to achieve this goal? Which steps should be completed first? Who will be involved? And what support does the team need? When thinking about support, members should be encouraged to think about what support they will need from each other, as well as from their organization. It's important to keep in mind that the answers to these questions may evolve as the activity is implemented, but developing this action plan is the first step towards reaching these recommendations.
Once teams have completed their action plans, take time to celebrate completing this project. It is a major accomplishment. Team members should also take time to meet with their leadership to share the recommendations and action plan. Team members should be specific when sharing their support needs with leadership. Once teams have taken the time to acknowledge the work they have done, it is time to begin the phases of systems change again, to continue to improve the response to sexual violence in their community. In this microlearning, you have learned the purpose and overview of the findings and recommendations, the final chapter of Case File Review. You have also learned some next steps teams can take once they complete their case file review. Thank you for watching the final microlearning in this series. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at svji@mincasa.org.